All right, so this session is a very exciting start for me because this marks the first session of your career, whether it is a chance or choice. Uh, Making a career decision or choosing a career is probably one of the toughest decisions that any individual will encounter and probably will be encountering through the years of self discovery, uh, especially when a student is in a second PUC. This question looms very high significance because you will have to choose what you would like to do, what you would like to take up for the next 4 years, with which you might probably be stuck for the next 30 years until unless you do not invest a lot of time in self learning. So the objective of the sessions starting from today is very simple: to give everybody who's joining the call an eye opener into this particular profession of choice, give them the various aspects around it from the perspective of the expert who is actually doing that, such that you will get a hands-on experience even before you've actually started joining the job or started taking that course. So this is the objective of these sessions moving forward, and I'm very happy all of you are a part of history because you've all been part of the first session, and this is the first session for many more sessions to come. Fingers crossed, ensuring that the sole objective being that if you go out of this call for 40 minutes, after 40 minutes you go out at least well versed with, hey, this is something that made me really explore and was very useful. So this is the objective of this session. So without further delay, I would like to introduce the guest for today. This guy worked in companies like Keen. He was working in companies like Adobe, was working in companies like McAfee, was the senior product manager at Microsoft. So he's somebody who knows uh, each and every aspect about what it is to be a computer science graduate, what it is to be an information science graduate, and what it is to be a software engineer. I would like to welcome Mr. Karthik Ramesh. The Karthik Ramesh is the one who's with the beard there. I know it's difficult. Most of you are in beards. The one with the longest beard probably is Mr. Karthik Ramesh, and of course with a slight bald in the front. So, Mr. Karthik Ramesh, I really appreciate you for for taking the opportunity and accepting my invite to be a part of this session. So the format of this session will be very simple. There were a few questions that I received from the children, from people around. We will be trying to address these questions through Mr. Karthik Ramesh, and I have made a few questions which I feel will be there in most of the students' minds and the ones who are currently working. And if time permits, we will definitely throw it open to question answers live. We will definitely be reaching out to all the people who shared our questions. Probably 40 minutes is a very less time to answer all the questions out there. So we will definitely reach out to each one of you and let you know what the expert has to offer. So, Mr. Karthik Ramesh, I will start with the first question that I received. Is engineering going to be the buzzword even in the future as well? The first question was on existence of engineering in the first place. So what is your opinion about the existence of engineering in the future?
Uh, Thank you, Karthik, for a warm introduction. And thank you, everyone, for attending this session. So, a disclaimer here, he has played up my role a lot. I'm not an expert who knows everything about everything. So, I've been in the industry for 14 years. I kind of understand the nuances of the industry, but the industry is so dynamic, it's shifting every day. So, there are going to be more uh, changes, and the way the industry is going to evolve, it's going to be a constant process. So, keeping that in mind, I think the first question which Karthik asked is a very interesting question, and I think it's a question uh, which is the base of this entire thing for the entire session, right? You take engineering and what is the career choice you get out of it, for which I have a small presentation I would like to kind of uh, give you. But before we get into that, let me talk about something. Let's talk about all the day-to-day things that most people or most of us use on a day-to-day basis and how technology is connected with it, right? Let's start off with the most used object in your life, which is a telephone or a smartphone. Let's say 20, 25 years back, you had these dial-in phones where you would pick up the receiver, which is connected to a dialer, and then you would dial and then you would call people. I think around 20 years back, you had the cordless phones where you could probably walk 10, 15 feet away from the main box where you could talk to someone. And now think about where we are, right? We went to the small button click phones and now you have smartphones, and the kind of stuff you can do with your smartphone is just incredible. Let's talk about Wi-Fi in itself. So until the 95s, you never had an internet connection. Most of it was email, fax. You used to reach out to people in so many different ways. And right now, with the advent of Wi-Fi, the way people connect this session right now would not have been possible, let's say 25 years back. We could not have done something like this. And let's take something which is even more basic, where all of us have so much photos to upload, so many data to share. You have so many things that you want to do. Imagine 10 years or 15 years down the line. 10 years down the line, you were probably doing it on CDs and DVDs where you would put it inside a CD case and burn all that data and then share it across with people. But no, nowadays you don't have something called as a CD or a DVD anymore. Everything is on the cloud, everything is on the internet, everything is so easy right now. How is all of this happening? And this is all happening because of engineers and not because of anyone else. So I think engineering in a stream, as a stream or as a profession, is going to continue because innovation is something which is inevitable and it will keep on happening for years to come. The speed at which the innovation is happening has changed, but it's not like engineering will become irrelevant. So I think we can put to rest the fact that engineering will not be relevant. It obviously depends upon what stream you get into and which stream might probably become a little obsolete. But engineering as a stream in itself is going to live, is my opinion.
So that puts the basic question to rest. So all of you are wondering whether taking up engineering right now and 4 years down the line, 8 years down the line, will I be out of my job? Will I struggle to find a job? So it is all put to rest because, as he said, it is just a game of innovation. You keep innovating, you keep innovating. That's the way the engineering has moved forward right from the time humans engineered a wheel. So this is a process that will continue forever. The second question that was very frequently asked by children was, what is the basic difference between a computer science engineering degree and an information science engineering? Because there's a lot of confusion related to that. People say it is more or less the same. People say no, it's slightly different. But if it is if it is more or less the same, why have they been branched into, or why do we have to separate branches altogether? So how do you clear this air?
Sure. So the fun thing about this entire conversation is back in 2003, when I was supposed to do my engineering, it was the same question that was there. I don't think the question has ever changed. The question always remains. And the answer probably hasn't been shared enough, probably for a fact that people haven't kind of gone about understanding what it takes. But anyways, let's try and demystify it for our participants here. I'll quickly present. If you guys can see my screen, uh, just let me know.
Yeah, I think your screen is visible for us.
All right. So what exactly is CSE and ISE, and how is it different is the question, if I'm not wrong, right? And for that, you have to get to the core of the question. And the core of the question is CSE as an engineering course is basically about the curriculum and the syllabus. And that's essentially what makes up any stream within engineering. And let's talk about who defines the curriculum for a particular stream. Let's say if it is CS or if it is IS. It's usually defined at a university level. So if I take VTU for an example, the university from which I passed out, a lot of colleges follow the same curriculum. So the textbooks were defined, the courses were defined, the kind of subjects that need to be taught were defined, and it was the university which was defining it. So in this entire exercise, what we will do is we will look at the curriculum from different university perspectives, and then we come to a college level. So at a university perspective, we will take up a university with state university like BTU. We'll talk about the IITs, which is probably the most talked about engineering institutes out there. We will talk about a regional institute like NIT Surathkal, and then we will talk about colleges as we progress. So now that we've set up some structure to this, right? Back from 2003 when I did my engineering and I was just reviewing the syllabus of 2020, all I see is the addition of 4 or 5 more subjects. So what does that tell you? That the course content hasn't changed a lot over time. And it's not something that we need to be sad about. The reason being, the core of computer science is still the same. It's all about programming. It's about understanding what computers can do, what you can achieve out of computers. And I think if you don't have a strong basic understanding of computers, uh, your skill set and the way you develop your own portfolio is going to become a little more harder if you learn it elsewhere. So now let's get to what exactly is taught in a VTU university for computer science students, right? You will usually learn a course of around 4 or 5 programming languages over the course of 4 years and 8 terms. And you'll learn a lot of computer basics like algorithms and what an operating system does, what is a microprocessor, and you'll learn how to design systems. You'll learn about computer networking. Few courses are about hardware courses like compilers and interpreters and stuff like that. So basically, it's an overall mixture of software, a little bit of hardware, and definitely you understanding the software ecosystem. So that is what computer science in itself kind of offers in VTU. Now let's quickly jump on to IITs and NITs, right? So what is it that is so different about IITs? So the main difference which you will see between an IIT and a VTU course is they have more programming labs. So in VTU, you probably have 4 or 5 programming labs, but in IITs, you'll have around 9 programming labs, and then you have more theory courses that you can pick. So it's a more focused, curriculum. But on the whole, if you look at it, I would say still 85% to 90% of it, you are learning the same content. It's just that some in the IIT is a little more narrow focus. And in NIT Surathkal, you can check out these links. These are all available online. The course content is very, very similar to IIT and VTU. So as a whole, as an umbrella statement, probably you can say that irrespective of the university you choose, 80% of the content that you will learn around computer basics and programming will be covered across the curriculum. So that's not the defining part of it. So now comes the question, what is CSE versus ISE and what is the difference? So CSE, we've talked about all these computer science programs now. So what is information science? For me, and take this on a lighter note, for me, information science is essentially, it's exactly as CSE. The only thing that is different is in CSE, you learn a couple of hardware subjects. In information science, you learn a couple of soft skill subjects, something like software testing or project management. But then you might ask, why is it that they've created 2 different courses for something that is like 95% similar, right? Does it really make sense to have 2 different streams of engineering like that? And the reason why I said take this with a lighter note is because I think it has a lot to do with privatization of colleges. So imagine now the IT boom in India and the amount of people who are getting into IT jobs and the number of people who want to take up computer science as a course. And it's probably in the top 2 or 3 courses that anyone wants to take if you pick up engineering as a stream, right? So your college can only admit, let's say 50-60 people for a particular course. Now if there's a demand of 120 people who want to do it, or let's say 150 people who want to do it, the easiest way is to kind of branch off CS into IS and probably have 1 or 2 differences to kind of make it a different course, but essentially it's the same thing that is being taught. And if you look at the final goal of what any engineer wants out of your engineering is essentially a placement. So 90% of them would essentially want to get their first job right out of engineering, get their pay packages, start working in the industry, implement whatever they've learned. There are a few people who would probably go for higher studies, and some of them probably get into their family business or just completely move away from engineering and they do what they want to do. So now, assuming the goal of everyone is to get placed, and most of the CS and IS folks get placed in tech companies, especially in India, CSE is exactly similar as ISE. And I am an information science student. I have a lot of friends who've done computer science. where we are today and the kind of jobs we were offered, the kind of functions we got into, it's exactly the same. There is absolutely no difference between CSE and ISE. So now,
Thank you. I sorry I interrupted you here. I interrupted you for a reason. Reason is that you gave us an information about IITs. You gave us information about the VTU colleges. You gave us information about NITs. Now we know how strict it or how difficult it is to get into an IIT. Probably it is the most difficult to get in. Then comes NIT. Getting in is not as difficult as getting into an IIT, but still it is as difficult, as close to getting into an IIT. VTU colleges relatively easy. Now tell me, how do you differentiate between these two? Now, which college should I join? If I don't get into an IIT, or if I don't get into an NIT, I just join some college which is there in VTU. Now, does that make a huge difference to the overall perspective of engineering?
um, so it's a very good question, and I think it's a very relevant question, and it's a question that's run through my own mind, I think, several number of times, right? I passed out of VTU, and when I saw my colleagues who were from IITs and who were from NITs, and I always used to think, oh, what is it that they did different and what happened and stuff like that. I think the answer to that is probably there in the next slide, and we can kind of lead into this. So I think, what college should I aim for, right? So there are certain things that you would probably want to imbibe in your decision making when you select a particular college or you select a particular university. And the way we are doing it, and it, like I said, it nicely falls into what a question Karthik asked, is we have split it into multiple factors and how do you go about the selection of a particular college. What is really important when you select a course is the people who teach the course. And in your IITs and let's say your BITS Pilanis, the professors are still doing a lot of research. They are still publishing a lot of papers. They are also consulting with a lot of tech companies, and they are currently constantly in touch with the entire industry, right? There are, in fact, if one of you guys are from, let's say, PES, I'm pretty sure you guys would have had a person called Anand teaching you compilers, and Anand was a director at Adobe. So that is how relevant a professor is when they come and teach a particular course to you, because they are in the industry, they understand it well. And when what happens when they have this kind of knowledge, it kind of directly trickles down into their teaching methodology, because they understand what is it that the industry wants and how do they kind of factor it into your curriculum, and they give you that experience. And now let's come to the second part of it, where we call hands-on experience, right? What do I mean by hands-on experience? Because we spoke, the entire curriculum is more or less similar across all these different institutes. And what is it about hands-on experience? So if you look at BITS Pilani, or if you look at the IITs out there, the major difference is the way the students are involved in the curriculum. It's a student-driven engagement. So when I mean it's a student-driven engagement, this is what I understand from my colleagues over the years. In BITS Pilani, after the first year, you have this grading system where it's GPA. There is no pass-fail concept. You fail obviously if you do not, you do really bad and you don't have sufficient attendance and stuff like that. But on a grading, on an average grading, you kind of always make sure that you have to pass, and you kind of move with the class. The way the course is taught is you have a faculty coming and teaching in what he thinks is relevant, and the questions are going to be based upon what he teaches in class. And it's not like across 5 or 10 different colleges you have to ask the same set of questions and this is exactly what needs to be taught. So it's very specific to a professor, and if you as a student are willing to go, if you are willing to learn, and if you have the appetite to understand, then you will score well. And which means you're also doing a lot of work through the labs, through your courses and stuff like that. But VTU, from my time and from what I understand from people joining in the industry right now, is very different. So you have certain set of courses that are kept. You have to score, let's say, 35 minimum marks out of 100, and in the lab you need to score certain things. And it's the same set of questions you have to learn across each lab. So there is no variety in learning, and it's not very student driven. It's very academy driven, and it's very university driven. So it's more like somebody's telling you what exactly you need to learn, and that becomes the output. So that's where I mean hands-on experience kind of plays a difference. And a major difference in, let's say, BITS or IIT, which I have seen, is they have these freedom to go do a lot of internships. They work with a lot of companies before their placement, so it kind of gets converted to pre-placement offers as well. So they get a feel of the industry even before they kind of start working, right? It does happen in some universities in VTU or some colleges in VTU, but it's not prevalent through all the colleges in VTU. And now, okay, now you know that there's a curriculum, there's a faculty who's teaching you, probably you have the intention to learn. But what is the output of all of this, right? You need to get placed at the end of it, and look at the placement percentages that are happening across different types of colleges. And if you look at it, the number of people who come to recruit is directly proportional to the number of people who are kind of getting recruited as well. I think that's simple maths for everyone. But why is it that some people are getting paid more and some people are getting paid less? The answer can again be split into two different, I would say, two halves or two buckets. It depends upon the kind of industries that are coming to hire and the kind of functions that they are coming to hire. So when I talk about industries within IT, you have product-driven companies and you have service-driven companies. So a product company is something like a Google or an Amazon or an Adobe, which builds products for itself and it sells it for someone and it sells it on the market, and people use these and the company directly makes money out of it. A service-driven company would be something like an Infosys or an Accenture, which builds products for other people. For example, how Infosys built the entire Aadhaar system for the Indian government. They are not the ones who are defining the requirements, but they're essentially implementing the requirements. So that's the major difference between service and product companies. Product companies tend to hire or they offer more lucrative packages. Service companies play it on the lower side. So this is the major difference why you see such a difference in pay packages and the kind of functions that they recruit for. Usually in your IITs and NITs, you get recruited for a lot of developer positions. But in your VTU, you also get recruited for testers and some of the functions which are not very highly skilled, but it is definitely needed across, right? So there are multiple factors that kind of pan in when you look at the average pay package. So now we've talked about all of this, and the bigger question which KK asked, right? How difficult, there's a reason why these guys get paid so much and it's very difficult cracking the IITs or the NITs. What do you do if you're from a VTU or let's say you're from one of these institutions? There's absolutely no need to worry. I would say the only thing that you need to worry about is for you to get to your goal. For suppose you want to work in a company like Google or Adobe, probably it's not the very quickest way if you go through a VTU university or something. You just have to spend some more time in the industry, really learn the tricks, learn the ropes of the trade, and then you can find your path eventually. So it's probably a longer route, but it's not the quickest route if you probably don't end up in the best university, but there's no need to feel disheartened at any given point in time. I think the opportunities are plenty. It's just all about you, how you work and how you take the system and you understand the system.
Yeah. Thanks for letting us know about this. So this is to all the children out there. Now, you try your best to get into an IIT. Give your best shot. But if it does not happen, there's no need to worry. The world is not going to end. You will still be getting a lot of opportunities. As with Mr. Karthik Ramesh, I think you did your engineering from BNMIT, which is, I don't have comparisons with that to an IIT. Let me not compare as well. But from BNMIT doing an engineering and then landing a job at Microsoft or Adobe is just a case of self-learning. It's just a case of motivating yourself. So all of you out there, if you are disappointed that you did not get into an IIT, no need to worry. The story is not going to end. You can just make a story of your own. Now, thanks a lot for bringing us this information about the various colleges around. I also really appreciate what you put there. Apart from these aspects which are put in numbers, of course, personal finances play a huge role because the costs involved in studying in an IIT or an NIT is entirely different. I get your point about international recruitment as well. And the kind of industries that each of these institutions target, or the industries targeting these institutions. Distance from home support system makes a huge difference. I know Abhilash on this call would be really wanting to come back to India to have the support system that he misses. So I do understand what you really mean by the factors that really help us. All right, we joined an IIT or got into NIT or got into an RV or got into a BNMIT. But after 4 years, is there any guarantee that I will get a job? Now, when I look at the society today, the society is only driven towards getting a job. Why do you want to do an engineering? Because it's easy for me to get a job. Now, that's the mindset that is there out there, both with respect to the parents as well as the children. So let me ask this question to you. After doing all the struggle at the end of 4 years, will somebody get a job?
Uh, I was so basically this is like I'm putting it as blunt as possible. Completing a course is not equal to a job offer. It never is. So why do I say this? So if you look at the number of IT jobs out there, probably it outweighs any other industry in India at this point. The number of jobs that are being created for engineers specifically. Uh, and I passed out in 2007. And when I passed out in 2007, I was lucky enough to have my offer. I joined a company called Character or Keen. Right now, it's called NTT Data. And within 5 months, recession hit, and I literally my team from 43 went down to 7, right? And that's how bad the situation was. And the batch that joined right after mine, they were all given a lot of offers, but none of them actually could join the company for the next year and a half because the economy was on a very bad downturn. You can currently see the same situation happening right now with COVID-19 happening. A lot of companies are laying off people. So that's the reason I say there is no guarantee, because the economic situation and there are multiple factors that kind of influence the job market, right? So if there are things that you cannot control, what is it that you can do to improve your chances of always trying to crack a role? And I think that is something which you should always work on. These are things which you cannot influence, right? You cannot influence a recession, or you cannot influence something like COVID-19. So what is it that you as a student or a graduate that you can influence? One thing which I think people need to understand is, if the curriculum is more or less the same across all of these, and if assuming now the number of students who join BTU would be somewhere in lakhs, and all of them are learning the same curriculum, and end of the day, it's the same pool of jobs that you're all looking out for, right? At the end of the year, what do you need to do to kind of step up your game and stand out? Because the curriculum is a leveler; it's the same thing that is taught. So, what I would suggest for any graduate student who's starting off undergraduation for the 4 years, get your hands dirty in understanding the subject you're doing. If it's computer science, just don't learn a program how to do a binary search or a bubble search or how to do a Tower of Hanoi or something like that. It really doesn't matter. But really understand, how do you build out a website? Can you build out a website that will stand on its own? Can you kind of build an app? Or let's say right out of engineering, if somebody tells you, hey, can you build an app for me which can do XYZ things? Do you think you're in a position to do something like that? Or let's say you really are interested in building out compilers, or you want to get into hardware. If somebody comes and tells you, hey, can you build something out for me in IoT, or I don't know, something with hardware? You feel qualified enough to take up a challenge right then and there? I think that's the question you need to answer, and that's what will kind of set you apart. So try and do a lot of freelancing. There are a lot of websites out there that offer freelancing. You can do it for free because you don't really need to make money. You can make money out of it once you've learned the skill. So the first couple of years, do it for free. Try and get skilled in a particular subject or a stream. A lot of companies right now, the number of startups that are coming up in India, and I'm pretty sure you guys are aware of it. A lot of people are always looking for help, right? You can always try to intern with these companies. Again, don't try and negotiate a lot of money, but just try and learn the skill. So it's all on you to learn the skill and kind of build up your portfolio or resume, buff up your candidature. And then finally, when it's D-Day and when it's placement and whenever that opportunity knocks, all of this will play into you standing out from the rest of the crowd. So it's all about trying and figuring out what you can do to kind of stand and set yourself apart from the crowd. And then there are factors outside your control which you cannot control. And I don't think you should feel bad about it. I think that's the way to look at finding a job.
I like one of the things that you said: the initial years of your career don't focus on money. Now, when you look at our society is built with that logic. As soon as you finish engineering, you should get this package. As soon as you finish engineering, this is the job that you should land. So the piece of advice for anyone out here: initial years, make sure that you plan for having better skill sets on your paper and on your hand, rather than looking at the amount of money that is falling into your wallet. Because with time, once your skill sets get upgraded to the requirement of the industry at that given instant of time, money will automatically follow. So thank you so much for giving us an idea about what are the additional things that somebody has to do. Self-learning is one very important aspect of engineering. Now, coming back to one basic question, uh, you have landed a job. Uh, Once you have landed a job, what is the guarantee? No, I've probably tried to rephrase this question. I have a lot of my friends who are working in the IT. They just wait for a Friday, Monday to Thursday, Monday to Friday. I see them slogging it out. They wait for a Friday because they want a weekend. And there's a phrase, thank God it's a Friday. So, is it a case that people who end up as software engineers do not enjoy what they're doing from Monday to Friday?
All right. It's a very interesting question, and I think it's also a satirical question. Probably my answer to that is a person who would really like what the industry has to offer has to find interest in either the industry in itself or the function that he's performing. So let's say if you really like, let's say you're working for a company like Ola or you're working for a company like Uber, and if managing big complex delivery problems or logistics problems is something that excites you, then I don't think you're really worried about a lot of things that come with your job, which is the pressure, making sure right now, how do you make sure uh, the deliveries are happening when your supply constraint is down. There are a lot of different things that factor into the pressure that creates on your job. But if you have something that you really like about the industry in itself, it kind of plays above something else. The second part of it is when you really like your function, right? And when I say function, so let's say you're a developer. And if you are really excited about technology, I can give you a very good example. A very dear friend of mine at Adobe, when we were working together, every time there was a new Android update, or let's say there was a new OS update on Mac or anything else, he would have installed it. He would come to me, he's like, dude, you need to check this out. This is so awesome. And look at the fonts, look at this, look at that. I always used to sit back and wonder, where is his enthusiasm coming from and why is it that he's feeling so excited about it? But the fact is, technology is moving at such a fast pace, especially in certain functions like let's say programming and the way apps are created, the apps are developed, and programming languages coming in and stuff like that. You really need to be excited about learning something and learning something new every single time something comes through. What happens then is you kind of become obsolete in an industry because it's running at such a high speed, and you always struggle to kind of move away from that shell and find a new shell because it's happening so quickly. So for me, you really need to see where your interest is. Either your interest is within the industry or a function. And if it's not within a particular function, try switching function that you find some kind of interest. So it makes it a little less cumbersome. Let's put it that way.
All right, one other question that I have with you is, how monotonous can a computer science or related job or a software development job become? Because at the end of the day, breaking the monotony is very important at any stage of your life.
Sure. I think let me step back and answer it a little different. I think monotony has nothing to do with computer science or information science. Monotony has something to do with every industry. I'm pretty sure you take manufacturing, or if you take even journalism, or you take any very like even event management, right? Monotony sets in when I think you are not pushing yourself to find out if there is something more you can do from your own profile. Is there something more you can get from your job? Can you squeeze something more? And if you don't have a direction into, let's say, what you want to achieve over, let's say, 5-10 years, the reason monotony sets in is because I think personally that you're not looking forward to something more, and you've kind of settled for something. But if you have, let's say, let me probably give you a very good example here. Let's say I was a software engineer. I was a white box tester when I started off at Adobe. From a developer, I moved to the testing role because I wanted to crack a product company. And then after 2 years, I was doing the same stuff again, and I felt this is something probably which I shouldn't be doing. And I could have easily put my leg back and said, okay, listen, I'm in a good company. I think I'm earning well. I don't really need to do something, and I can just stay with what I have. But somewhere I had this nagging feeling that I need to do something about it. And then that's when I shifted out of Adobe. I moved to McAfee into a development role where I kind of pushed myself. And I moved back to Adobe as a developer again. I said, okay, now I'm back in a good company with the role I want, but let's see where it goes. So at some point, I think monotony sets in when you've kind of settled. But if you don't, then you always have an option to shift between functions, shift between industries. It's all about you. I think it's you who drives monotony in the end.
Yeah, so talking about shift, Mr. Karthik Ramesh, you worked with all these amazing companies, then you left all of that and you did your master's, you did your MBA from ISB. So shifting from software to management, and then right now you're working on your own product based app which is related to sports. This is something really interesting. How did this transition happen?
It's actually something. Okay. I have a visual way of communicating this. I thought I will finish this off with a nice note, but now that this has come up, I think this is a good place to look at it. So if you look at this small presentation that I have, right? So if you look at it, what it essentially says is there are people who do something that they really like. There are people who work for money, and then there is a profession, right? The intersection of all of this is essentially your, some people call it as a purpose of life or whatever everyone strives to get to, which is the center of this. And all of the reasons that KK or Karthik asked me for is essentially I'm trying to get close to the center. And I started off with what was the profession for which I get paid for, and slowly started building up my strengths. Now I'm slowly trying to move towards the passion. Hopefully there'll be a day where I end up with a purpose. So that's my story.
So this brings us to the last leg of our conversation and probably the invite for the next leg. So the next leg of the conversation will focus on drivers. So this is happening on Wednesday, the coming Wednesday. Now, what drives somebody into what you want to, what you really want to do? Now, whether it is money, whether it is peer pressure, whether it is work satisfaction, job satisfaction. This is happening on the coming Wednesday. We'll have Mr. Karthik Ramesh, who will give us a brief insight into how there was a shift from working in companies like Adobe, McAfee, Microsoft, and then suddenly doing your MBA and trying to shift focus towards sport. This is going to be a very interesting conversation. We are running short of time, so I would like to take this opportunity to really thank all of you on this call for being here, really patiently listening to whatever has happened. Uh, if you have follow-up questions, please mail me the follow-up questions. I will share it with Mr. Karthik Ramesh so that you will get the benefit of the questions being answered. Any question during the course of this session, if you really had, unfortunately, because of the lack of time, I could not take it up, but I'll be very happy to address those questions. Please mail it to me. I'll make sure that it reaches Mr. Karthik Ramesh and get back to you. Thank you so much. It's a Saturday evening and it's about to rain outside in Bangalore. So you had a choice of eating hot bhajis with a cup of coffee and then looking at your favorite TV program, or you had a choice of coming here and then listening to all of us. You took the choice of coming here and being with us. I hope the last 40 minutes gave you an eye opener. I wouldn't say that you got everything out of it, but the 40 minutes at least gave you a different perspective about what engineering is all about and what computer science is all about. So until Wednesday, I will share the link for the Wednesday session as well. I would like to thank Mr. Karthik Ramesh for guiding us through the nuances of computer science and information science engineering. Thank you so much, Abhilash, for joining us all the way from Germany. Really appreciate you and all my kids who are studying currently for second PUC. Just focus on giving yourself one deadline. Say June 10th is your exam. Plan for June 10th. Keep a timetable ready. So wonderful meeting all of you. I hope the first session was really productive. We will again meet up on Wednesday for the next leg of this conversation. Thank you so much. Have a nice day. Namaste.
Sorry, Karthik, just before we conclude this session, I just have one request. Because we're doing something like this for the first time, and it's my first time interacting with you people, I would like to get some feedback from you guys. So probably I'll ask Karthik to share a feedback form, and if you felt the session was relevant, or if you felt you need to answer more questions, or if you'd like to learn something which we did not cover, please let us know. We would definitely like to touch upon those topics. We want these 30-40 minutes that you took off from your rigorous career, day-to-day life to be more productive. So that's a request from me. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll definitely be sharing the feedback with all of you. Please give your genuine feedback. And all of you who know me very well, I am somebody who's really open to criticism. You give me the feedback on my face, I'll just take it with a smile, because at the end of the day, what matters is post this, when we do one more session, the people who are participating in it should be benefited out of it. So thank you so much. Once again, greetings from my side. Greetings from India, Abhilash.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't know. I think we still have time. It was supposed to end in 40 minutes. I have people joining in as well. So Shreyas, my kids from the BRICS, go ahead. Don't waste your time. All the gyan that I gave you are more than chemistry. Make sure you put it into practice. Clear? Start studying. All the very best. We'll again meet you all on Wednesday. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.